On the way to Greenwich. I woke up with a start, trying to remember where I was. I could dimly remember the conversation of last night and the old woman's greedy eyes, her hand stretched out over for my ring. Panicking, I groped under the straw mattress I'd been sharing with Nick. The purse was quite safe, with the ring snug inside it, and my dagger was as secure in its sheath in my belt. There was no sign of Nick or Meg. I could hear the old woman chortling down below about something. The little child Arthur screamed for food and fell silent again. Then I heard the ladder creaking. Nick stuck his head over the top, grinning cheerfully. "How do you neighbours do sleep?" he said. "Half the day's gone already." I would like to eat. I felt bewildered and afraid. I didn't know what to do or where to go or how to believe in this strange tiny house. "Grandmum says if you come quick there's some porridge left, and if you don't the pigs will have it." How shall I get washed? I didn't like being washed, but I felt sticky and dirty and itchy with flea bites after my night on the straw. He wrinkled his nose as if the idea of getting washed at all was very strange. "You can draw up water from the well, but you'll have to bring it indoors in a pail. It's bitter cold out this morning." And he disappeared again. I decided against washing. I crawled off the mattress and remembered I had no other clothes to wear anyway. I fastened my belt around my waist and patted my dagger and purse into place. The animals had been shooed outside, thank goodness, and Meg was sweeping their droppings after them. Her grandmother strewed a few fresh rushes behind her. The fire burned brightly in the middle of the room, and the cold sunlight streamed through the open doorway, turning the smoke golden. "Draw up a stool and eat," Wooden Susan called to me, "and then you'll be on your way." I sat down by the fire and waited to be served, but she bustled away and picked up her drop spindle, bobbing it at her side while she drew the dark thread up and down, up and down. Her hands were gnarled and cracked like splintered twigs. She waddled outside, calling "Good morrow" to passing neighbours, as busy and bright-eyed as one of her hens. Sarah Downey slipped in like a silent cat, towed the last of the rushes into place, and picked up the infant, who had started screaming. She put him to her breast and held him tucked firmly in place with one arm, while she picked up a pail of scraps with the other and carried it out to feed the animals. Meg was milking the cow, singing dreamily to herself. She half turned her head as if she knew I was watching her, and smiled and nodded to me, which made me turn away, but I don't know why. I watched them all coming and going, busy with their work, and realised that no one was going to serve me with food. I poured myself some ale, fetched a wooden bowl and spoon, and scraped the last of the porridge from the pot. As I sat down to eat, the grandmother Susan turned around from the doorway and grinned her gummy smile. "When you finish, there's a pail of water to draw from the well and the pot to be cleaned," she said. "You'll find a bunch of horsetail to scrape it out with." I blushed with anger. Surely she didn't expect me to do it. "And then Nick has a plan for you." I ate my porridge quickly and put my dirty bowl on the hearth next to the empty porridge pot, then hurried outside to where Nick was loading his handcart with straw baskets for market. "What plan?" I asked. "To get to Greenwich," she said. "I'm going to take you down to the wherry now. The tide should be right if we're quick." "And look, I've made you this, to keep you safe." Meg came out of the cottage behind me, holding out a slim plaited cord. "Give me your ring, sir." I wouldn't do that. The cold daylight had cleared my head of any such foolishness. Instead, I took the cord from her and turned away so my back was to Meg and Nick. I slid my ring from my purse and threaded it under the cord. "Will you let me, sir?" She was teasing me with her laughter, but all the same, I let her help me. I clutched the ring the whole time while she stood on her toes and looped the knotted cord around my neck. Then she tucked it inside my shirt. Her fingers were icy cold, making my flesh tingle, but her breath was like warm feathers on my cheek. All the time the grandmother was watching us from the doorway of the cottage, her fingers twitching on the dark wool, her drop spindle bobbing like a wooden doll. "There now, you're quite safe." Meg smiled, stepping away from me. I remember my courtly manners at last, and I bowed to her as if she was a maid-in-waiting, half mocking. She giggled and put her hand to her mouth in embarrassment. "You and Nick should hurry now." I hardly had time to thank them before Nick sped off. I did my best to keep up with him, and he kept stopping and hopping impatiently from one foot to the other, waving me on. At last we arrived at the river. Boatmen crowded around the wharf steps, waiting to ferry people across the river. "Which one should I take?" I asked, gazing along the row of boats moored up to the bank. And how will I pay?" "I'm going to ask one of the ferrymen to take us. If one of them remembers my father, we'll be all right. If not, we'll walk. Just wait here a bit." I don't need you to come with me, I said. I want to do this on my own. He took his hat off, turned it round in his hands, gazing at it as if the words had written all over it, if only he could read, then put it back on his head. Fact is, sir, you do need me. You may be dressed like a common lad, but you don't talk like one. You see them beggars over there? They've got a language of their own. That's how they talk to each other. I know their language because my family was begging just like them after my father went away. I know their language like you know that Latin language, and I can tell you which one is more important when you're out on the streets of London. I looked away, miserable. I knew he was right. Brother John had told me that Latin would take me anywhere in the world, but he never thought that I'd be homeless and fatherless in my own country. He must have known the language of beggars too. He had lived with them for long enough, but he had never thought to teach it to me. Next thing, Nick went on, you don't walk like a common lad. You got this sort of rolling swagger that I only ever see rich people do. Like you never got anything to spend your time doing. Looking around you, everyone's walking fast. Got to do this, got to do that, else they'll go hungry. You got to learn to walk quick. Then you won't be noticed. You won't last a minute, not without me to watch out for you. I tell you, you've got eyes that aren't bright enough and feet that aren't fast enough and ears that aren't sharp enough. You do need me, sir, or you'll be cut up like a rabbit for the stupid in no time. My eyes were smarting. I wanted to block my ears so I couldn't hear his prattling voice anymore. Why did my father have to be sent to prison? Why did my sister go to Calais? I was alone in the world and none of it was my fault. He went on relentlessly. Nick, the chattering startling. And when you get to that Greenwich Palace, what then? What if someone sees you, knows what your face or your voice? Are you going to go marching up to those gates all on your own? How are you going to find that law crazy? You do need me, sir. You need Nicholas Drake. I choked back with sobs of misery that were rising in my guts and nodded blindly. I squatted on the wharf steps and left it to Nick to find a boat for us. It helped to calm my nerves to watch the water. Nick worked his way along a line of bargemen and wherrymen preparing to go downriver, babbling cheerfully as he went, till he found one he knew was his father. I could hear his voice all the way. The last bargeman said he would let us on for nothing as the boat wasn't full. There was some rich folk on board already, but I didn't recognise any of them. I kept my head down just in case, and my telltale red heads stuffed well inside my cap. Nick chatted to the oarsmen till they grew tired of him. Then he crouched down next to me, whistling brightly. Was your father really a wherryman? I asked. Used to be. Then he went to sea, and I thought I would never see him again. And he came back full of such wondrous tales that I wanted to sail away with him. He went to lands that were so hot that the people who lived there had no clothes on, and the lands that were so cold that the sea around them got blocked up with ice for weeks and weeks on end, and the ships were stuck like nails in a coffin. Imagine that, sir, like when the Thames freezes up, only it's a sea like this. He held his arms out wide. And there's nothing but miles and miles of ice all around you. Oh, when it creaks and groans, my father says, like it's alive sometimes. His eyes were gleaming with the mystery of it. He folded his arms around his chest, hugging him. One day, I'm going to be a sailor like my father. I'm going to sail around the world. I want to have adventures. I want to see everything there is to see, the monsters in the sea and the giants on the land. His mouth puckered. But I wish I knew where he is now, sir. I wish I knew. I would really see him again. There are things he doesn't know. Lots of things. He went so quiet and still then, as though he'd dropped into a deep well inside himself, that I thought he might be offended if I asked him any more questions. Then he suddenly roused himself and said, for a start, he doesn't know that my mother had a baby, does he? He went away 8 months before Arthur was born. Arthur's nearly 2 years old now and doesn't even know he's got a father. And my father doesn't know that our Christian and our Henry took a sickness and died in the same week, just before last Christmas. His voice shook. My little brothers, they died and he doesn't even know that. And he doesn't know that we were turned out of our house because we had no money left. Mother was sick, so sick. She would talk or eat after... She wouldn't talk or eat after my brothers died. I had to go begging, and Meg had to look after Mother and Arthur. And we had nowhere to sleep but hedges. And their mother died. And he doesn't know that. And then we came to Grandmam Susan's house, and she let us stay with her. Sarah Downey, she didn't know us at all. But Grandmam asked her to feed baby Arthur like she would feed her own, and she does. She's strange. She doesn't talk much. She frightens me sometimes, the way she stares. But she looks after Arthur, so she's not a bad woman, is she? I shook my head, not trusting myself to say anything at all. But my father doesn't know any of that. He doesn't know where we live now, sir. That's what I dream every night. I dream that my father comes back home from sea, and he doesn't know where to find us." Then Nick fell into a deep, gloomy silence, and I didn't know where to go to bring him out of it. I had never thought much before about the misery of other people, especially not common folk. Nick was nothing to do with me. His life was nothing to do with mine. The poor were lowborn, and that was that. They had to put up with whatever happened to them. But all the same, I knew how much he worried about his father. I could understand that. And I knew what it felt like when your mother had died, and your brother too. I knew about those huge, dark, empty spaces that would never, ever be filled again. Just at that moment, I knew that Nick and I weren't all that different, after all. Because he wasn't talking, and because it hurt my brain to try and reason with God why God let such awful things happen to people, I concentrated on the other conversations that were going on in the barge. The young noblemen were laughing and gossiping. It was all noblemen ever did, I remembered. They were courtiers, I found out. After a cup of time, they began to talk about Prince Edward, my little prince. My ears were scorching and were straining to listen to them. My heart was pounding uncomfortably. I shifted on the bench and leaned forward, and realised that then they were even talking about me. "He just ran away," one of the young men said. "No permission asked for, not a word of explanation, no goodbye, nothing." "Perhaps he's dead," one of the others suggested. "It's to be hoped he is. If he's not and he's found, the king won't spare his life, that's for sure. You should have seen his rage when he heard about it. They say the boy was his favourite. Must have been, because he wasn't an aristocrat, you know. Not a Carrow by birth, just a Montague." I felt Nick up beside me. I leaned forward, my hands covering my face. "He came from some god-forsaken old manor house miles away. King Henry took a liking to him, you know what he's like, and he gave him the job that should have been Percy Howard's in the first place. Percy was out of his mind with fury. He was sure to be the prince's page. Everybody thought so. I mean, he's the Duke of Norfolk's nephew. But when the boy's found, he'll be flogged in public. Hanged for treason, more like. What about the nurse? I heard she was punished for letting him go." "Aye, Mother Jack was beaten and locked away, but the little prince pined for her and King Henry had her released. But he's to have a dry nurse anyway. Sybil Penn now he's too. So Mother Jack will be lucky if she can stay at Hampton Court. But you know Sir Andrew, one of His Majesty's archers. Well, Sir Andrew was flogged, of course. He was the last to see the boy. He was having an archery practice with him. He refused to say where the boy had gone. Poor fool. No, there's no doubt about it. If that Montague boy hasn't drowned or been stabbed by robbers on the highway, he's in for an even worse death when he's discovered." They tittered at the thought, and then their gossip moved on to other things. Nervously, I gripped Father's ring through my shirt. I felt that my world had truly gone dark, as dark as midnight.